What's going on, diehards? It's Clint back here with the Total Takedown for Thursday, UFC Vegas 64 edition. And yes, I am rocking all the Coyotes gear still. This is my cold room warm stuff. It's cold, it's wet, it's rainy. You're going to be seeing a lot of this. I'm going to bust out the beanie here pretty soon. Anyway, we're going to go back over UFC Vegas 64. This time we're talking totals, overs, and unders. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you haven't already. And hey, give me a share. If you're listening to this thing on audio, give me a review, preferably 5 stars. But, you know, if you want to say you hate my face, that's fine too. I'll take it. First fight of the night, Ramona Pascal taking on Timiris Vidal. We've got a total set at 2.5. The over is minus 215. The under 2.5 is plus 190. We're talking unknown women's MMA here. And usually, especially with the way Ramona fights, you would think over, right? Over 2.5 minus 215 sounds like a sweet deal. However, the way Vidal fights, I think this is going to turn into a bit of a barn burner. I think Ramona's got some serious offensive upside here in this thing. And the way Vidal falls for leg locks, the way she tries to attack people's legs and ankles and stuff like that, there is actually a decent chance that this fight finishes. It's classic women's MMA for me, though. I would want fight doesn't go the distance. I would want that extra 2 minutes and 30 seconds at the end of the fight and just get like, you know, plus 170 or plus 175, something like that. Fight doesn't go the distance rather than the plus 190 for the under 2.5, because those final couple minutes of the third round could make all the difference. I absolutely can see Vidal gassing out and Ramona TKOing her. I can see Ramona making a dumb grappling mistake and getting an arm or a leg snapped off by Vidal. This thing definitely could go under. Lots of volatility. First fight of the night. I'll choose violence. I'm probably not going to bet that, though. Next up, Jake Hadley taking on Carlos Candelario. Almost the exact opposite. Total set at 2.5. The over is minus 215. The under is plus 190. Carlos Candelario is incredibly tough. Incredibly durable. Kind of meat and potatoes striker. Good single leg. He leaves his neck out there to be had a little bit. I talked about that on the Monday podcast. Jake Hadley can dive on people's necks, and he's got a tight guillotine on him, so I do think there is a little bit of submission upside here on the Jake Hadley side of things, but more than likely, we're going to get kind of a semi-technical brawl here on the feet where these guys go at it in the striking realm, and if that's the case, both of them are more than capable of gutting it out and getting to the judges' scorecard, so I kind of like the over 2.5 at minus 215 here for the second fight of the night. Johnny Munoz Jr. taking on Ludwig Shayilan, total again at 2.5. Over is minus 180, under is plus 160. And I feel like the finish only comes from one side here most of the time. Johnny Munoz Jr.'s submissions are wicked. This dude is so slick on the ground. He is a fantastic top position player. Ludwig Shayilan, though, has a wrestling background, so he could give up his neck in a poor takedown attempt. He also could be in trouble if he ends up on bottom. Now, if he's sitting on top, though, this thing is going to be a grind fest. He's going to try to stay safe, try to survive Johnny Munoz. The only reason I feel like there's maybe some finishing upside on the Ludwig Shayilan side is the chin of Johnny Munoz Jr. We've seen him chinned a couple times. He leaves his head up. He's got that tall man defense. That chin is there to be cracked. So I am very, very skeptical of this fight. It's tough to call. I kind of like violence. I think Johnny Munoz Jr. is going to find a submission at some point in this fight. However, I really don't like the number here. And the under 2.5 at plus 160, I'd rather play Johnny Munoz by sub by itself. Ludwig Shayilan knockout is there, but I'm not overly impressed with Shayilan. I think if he wins, it's more of a decision grinding affair. So I'm going to stay completely far away from this one. I guess I'll say over 2.5. I mean, this is one of those ones where I kind of contradict myself. When you think about the fight as a whole, I think the over makes sense. But what I really think is going to happen is Johnny Munoz gets a sub. So, I don't know. I'll pick the under. Under 2.5, plus 160. Jinyu Frey, Polyana Viana. Over 2.5 is minus 220. The under 2.5, plus 190. And I think over. Polyana Viana getting better. She's young. She's tough. She's gritty. She gets taken down, put on her back, looks for subs. If she doesn't armbar you from her back, she'll just kind of play off her back for the whole time. Jinyu Frey, constant forward pressure. She's got that big left hand, but she doesn't have much beyond that, so she doesn't really finish anybody. This thing is headed for the judges' scorecards unless Polyana Viana finds herself a submission. I don't see Jinyu Frey finishing Polyana, so I think it's probably going over more often than not. Long way to say minus 220. Over 2.5. Benito Lopez taking on Mario Bautista. Total again at 2.5. Over is minus 130. Under is plus 110. Now we got a much more interesting line here, and a couple of them coming up here. We'll actually have some stuff to talk about. Both these guys are high caliber finishers. We've seen Benito Lopez hurt. We've seen Mario Bautista injured and finished. Benito Lopez has a history of injury in general, coming off a 3-year layoff. So we're going to get a whole new version of him. Is he a point fodder now? Does he continue throwing flying knees? I don't know. We haven't seen him in 3 years. So more often than not, I think this is going to be a clash. I think Mario Bautista, the way he fights, just kind of forces a bit of a brawl. And Benito Lopez, being the flashy striker that he is, he'll look for those opportunities. That's always what he's been. That's always what he's done. I've got a hard time imagining that he's completely retooled his entire game plan in his absence. So I do think both guys have more than enough finishing upside, and we have seen both guys finished. So I will say the under 2.5 at plus 110. Shanna Young taking on Miranda Maverick. The total set at 2.5 again for this one. At a pick'em, minus 110 for women's MMA. This one's tough because Miranda Maverick tapped out Shanna Young in like 60 seconds in their first fight. Shanna Young cracked Miranda Maverick, and she panic wrestled from getting hit so hard. So Miranda took it to the mat, didn't take her long to get the back, tapped Shanna Young out. This is a classic spot where I think one fighter is being massively overrated, the other fighter is being massively underrated. However, I do agree with Miranda Maverick being favored. So just because I think Shanna Young is better than people give her credit for, doesn't mean Miranda Maverick is not still going to choke her out. I think the grappling advantage for Miranda Maverick cannot be understated, but I also think Shanna Young's probably gotten better. There's a chance she kind of survives here, and with these women's MMA totals, it is so rare we see them drop down to minus 110 because they go over just so very often. If Shanna Young plays her cards right, she makes it to the judges' scorecards, and I think we can get over this 2.5. The Miranda Maverick sub is definitely something there that we're going to have to watch out for. But again, you're going to get a better number playing that submission prop by itself. That's really the only way I see this fight ending, unless Shanna Young does another banana peel meme KO type of thing and catches Miranda Maverick coming in. Either way, it's either a submission or a decision. So I'm going to say over 2.5 just based on the line value of the minus 110. But like I said, I don't mind taking a look at the Miranda Maverick submission prop because it's like plus 165, plus 170. And that's much more the way this fight will finish if it does. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke taking on Darrick Minner. I played this one, folks. This is the one that jumped off the table at me. I'm already in on it pretty big. Over 2.5 is plus 100 even money. Under 2.5 minus 120, and I'm on the under 2.5, minus 120. I like violence here. Darrick Minner is a guy that comes out like a bat out of hell in round one. He's got crazy submissions. He's got those big clubbing power strikes, trying to hurt you, trying to rock you, get you down to the ground, and then he'll take you back and he'll tap you out. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke, he's basically all grappling. He wings heavies, like these big, uncontrolled, unfocused, wild power strikes, just trying to hurt you, and then he'll get on top of you, and instead of looking for subs, though, he'll kind of blanket wrestle you is what he looks for. But you see his last fight, man, he gave up so many bad positions to TJ. And if you give Darrick Minner those opportunities, he will make you pay for it. Shayilan Nuerdanbieke's been submitted, I believe, 6 times in his professional career. So that's kind of the hole in his grappling game, is when he fights one of these savvy submission fighters, he gives it up. And frankly, Darrick Minner may be a step up in competition for him coming into this spot. Minner, on the flip side of this thing, he's coming off of having a concussion, legitimately. Like, he canceled his last fight due to concussion symptoms, and he has a 7-minute gas tank. So if he doesn't get his opponent out of there in the first round, he just falls apart the deeper the fight goes. So if Darrick Minner does not get the round 1 sub, I fully expect Shayilan to take over, and then once Darrick gets tired, Shayilan can open up from there, either get a sub of his own or a TKO. Under 2.5, both guys can be finished very easily. Both guys have that upside of finishing ability. Give me that minus 120 for the under 2.5. Mark Madsen taking on Grant Dawson. Both high-caliber grapplers here. Caliber, I missed the B there. High-caliber grapplers here. Over 2.5 is minus 200. The under 2.5 is plus 175. And I would say over makes the most sense to me here. Mark Madsen is a guy that, I've talked about this, he gets tired and he just finds a way to work through it. He finds a spot where he can slow down, take a deep breath, and reload, and then he forces himself through again and gets to the decision. That's what he does every single time. He's undefeated, and he just keeps on finding ways to win. He's taking on Grant Dawson here, a guy who does kind of a similar thing, except he flounders a little bit in that third round. You know, you can make the argument that he got submitted, I think it was 2 fights ago in the third round, where he was hanging on for literally dear life and then couldn't stand up after the bell had rang because that choke was in so tight. The referee didn't call it. He was able to sit up and kind of show he was still there, so he got the decision win. But it's been close. It's been close and hairy for Grant Dawson more than once. I could see this fight ending in that third round. I really could. Just the way both these guys fight, the way they go so hard, so heavy grappling early, it leaves not a lot of gas in that third round. But both of them also could be just exhausted enough that whoever gets on top ends up riding out the decision here. I'll say over 2.5, minus 200. I do think the decision is more than likely the path here. If it's going to finish at all, it would be in that final third round. Nate Maness taking on Tagir Ulanbekov, another 2.5 total here. And this one is binary. You're picking your fighter, right? And the money lines almost correlate with the totals here. Minus 215 on the over 2.5, minus 220 is Tagir. Plus 190, the underdog Nate Maness, plus 190 for the under 2.5. Nate Maness is a finisher. Like, he hurts people. When he's on point, he's able to knock anybody out. His jiu-jitsu is serviceable. It's not great. Tagir Ulanbekov is a wrestling monster. Team Khabib, he's with the Eagle, so you know what he's going to do. He's not quite the caliber of wrestler that some of those other Russian monsters are. He's a bit more of a striker, but he's a very technical striker. So I could see this thing being a technical fight, going over 2.5. But the big question is Nate Maness, because he's dropping to a new weight class. And I'm getting TJ vibes. Like, when TJ tried to drop that extra weight class to go for the double champ status, and he looked like he was a dead man walking, like, Nate Maness looks like a skeleton in the fighter interviews. I'm very scared of what he's going to look like on the scales tomorrow when we check him out. His durability is already something that I find questionable, and I'm going to have even more questions about it after making this weight cut. Now, Tagir is not a big-time finisher guy, but like I said, he's more striker Russian than grappler Russian. If they get into a technical striking match, it wouldn't shock me whatsoever if Nate gets binked, because he just can't take a punch. After cutting all that extra weight, he could be exhausted from the effort it takes to get his body down to that weight class. So the under 2.5 in this fight has my attention. Either Nate Maness is a big bully and he's beastly at this weight class and Tagir doesn't have anything for him because he's awesome, or he's a wounded animal and he gets taken out by Tagir Ulanbekov because the finish will just be there for him, when frankly, normally speaking, he'd be tough enough and durable enough to get through it. Now he can't, because he does not have that extra 10 pounds of water weight surrounding his brain. So I'll say violence, under 2.5, plus 190. Josh Parisian taking on Chase Sherman. This one, I believe, was a 1.5 a little earlier in the week. You get your classic heavyweight over 1.5, which I think this thing could squeeze over. But now they've moved it to a 2.5. Over 2.5 is plus 140, the under 2.5 minus 190. And it would make a lot of sense to me here for this thing to find its way under. Now, we could get a sloppy heavyweight 15-minute affair. But at the same time, Josh Parisian is a guy that if he gets on top of you, you're in trouble. Like, his ground and pound, his elbows, his submissions, he's really good from top control positions. Chase Sherman is not good from bottom control positions. He did show a better get-up game against Alexander Romanov in his last fight. I will credit him with that. And he's hell on wheels early on in fights. Lots of leg kicks, decent power. The good striking has always been there. He just has a hard time keeping that pace up, and he has a hard time keeping that belief in himself up. He'll quit if you give him the opportunity to. So I could see these guys getting a little bit sloppy, but you know what, actually, and now that I say that, I could see it getting a little sloppy. I could see these guys kind of laying on each other. The deeper this fight goes, if Chase Sherman isn't able to, like, standing TKO Josh Parisian, a guy who's been pretty tough to put away for the most part, I could see, like, a leaning against the fence, hanging onto each other's wrist, punching bag type of heavyweight affair, and I'll change my answer. I'm going to say over. I'm going to say over 2.5. I'll say Josh Parisian takes the early beating from Chase Sherman and then can't get Chase Sherman or can't keep Chase Sherman down. Maybe they work their way to a decision. I don't have any confidence in this fight whatsoever. I'm not betting that one, so don't take that to the bank or anything. But if you can get an over 1.5, I'd be far more interested in the over 1.5 than I am the over 2.5, even if you have to lay a price on it. Daniel Rodriguez taking on Neil Magny. Another 2.5 total here. Whole fight card, 2.5s this week. Over 2.5 is minus 215. The under 2.5 plus 190. And again, it's a Neil Magny fight. This guy does one thing, and that's grind. Unless Daniel Rodriguez is the guy to finish Neil Magny, if he's good enough, like Shavkat Rakhmonov, to like snatch a neck or something like that, Neil Magny doesn't finish anybody. So this fight is going to be a grindy decision over win, lose, or draw, and I expect it to kind of go that way. I'll save some time. Over 2.5 minus 215. Main event time. Amanda Lemos taking on Marina Rodriguez. We got a 4.5 for the ladies. The over 4.5 is plus 100. The under 4.5 is minus 120. And I'd have to side with violence on this one. I'd have to say the under 4.5. Mostly because Amanda Lemos is another one of these early finishers. I still have no idea how Angela Hill survived that front kick in round 1. Marina Rodriguez is tough. She's gritty. She is durable. But she's also facing someone who hits a lot harder than anybody she's fought up till this point. So Amanda Lemos always has that chance to catch her. If this fight gets extended, though, we've never seen Amanda Lemos go past 3 rounds. We've seen her get tired in that 3rd round. She lost the split to Angela Hill in that situation where she started to slow down. This is a 5-round main event, folks. Marina Rodriguez is someone who ramps up the deeper the fight goes. She starts to feel herself in that 2nd and 3rd round. The volume gets better. She finds her timing and her space. I could see a late finish from Marina Rodriguez as much as I could see an early finish from Amanda Lemos. I know we don't see a lot of finishes with women's MMA, but the way these two match up, I kind of think that's the way to go. If they start fast, I don't think it's going to last very long. So I would say under 4.5 at -120. It's tough to lay unders with women's MMA fights, especially. But, these two fighters are some of the few ones. You think about like Weili Zhang, and you think about Rose Namajunas, or Jessica Andrade, the women's MMA fighters who do finish and can finish with regularity. This is the next crop of them. Amanda Lemos and Marina Rodriguez are fully capable. So I'll say under 4.5, -120. That's the total takedown, everybody. Thank you again very much for hanging out. See you tomorrow for the undefeated post weigh-in show. Let's roll.